I want to ask you something today, and I want you to really sit with it. What scares you the most? And not just the surface answer, no spiders or heights or public speaking, but the real one. The fear that is underneath the fear. The one that you don't usually say out loud, maybe not even to yourself. Because here is what Harry Potter teaches us through one of its most extraordinary creatures. Your deepest fear is almost your greatest map. It shows you where your next level of freedom is waiting. Today, as you guessed it, we are talking about Boggarts. And by the end of this video, I think you'll never look at your fears the same way again. Welcome, witches, wizards, and magical souls. I solemnly swear that your magic is limitless. So, let's start with what a Boggart actually is. Because for me, it's much more fascinating than most people realize. A Boggart is what the wizarding world calls a non-being. This means, and it is crucial, that it has never been alive. It has no true form of its own. It exists purely as a reflection of human emotion. It lives in dark, confined spaces, such as wardrobes, the space under a bed, shadowy corners of a forest, and it waits quietly until someone comes close enough. And the moment you face it, crack, it transforms instantaneously into the thing that you fear the most. And not just a generic monster, not something that everyone is scary about, but the specific, personal, deepest particular thing that lives in your fear. A giant spider for Ron, a full moon for Lupin, a corpse for Molly, McGonagall announcing failure for Hermione, and here is what I find extraordinary about this creature. It doesn't create your fear, but it reveals it. Yes, the Boggart is a mirror. And it shows you what is already inside of you. The thing that you have been carrying, perhaps without even fully knowing it. Which means that facing a Boggart is not really fighting a monster, but it's facing yourself. Interesting, isn't it? Now here is where it gets even more interesting. Because most of us, when we think about fears, we go to the surface level. Spiders, snakes, the dark, flying, heights. These are real fears, valid, visceral, completely understandable. But underneath them, there is almost always something deeper. Ron is afraid of spiders. Do you know why? It's in the books. Because when he was younger, his brother Fred turned his teddy bear into a spider. A moment of shock, of helplessness, of being unable to control what happens to something he loved. The spider isn't the real fear. The fear is the powerlessness he felt at this time. And think about Hermione. In Lupin's class, when she faces the Boggart, it turns into Professor McGonagall telling her that she has failed everything. Every single exam, every class. Maybe on the surface, it shows the fear of the failure. But go deeper. Why does failure terrify Hermione so profoundly? Because her entire identity, her entire sense of worth is built on being the best, on being right, on being enough. The Boggart doesn't show her McGonagall, it shows her the collapse of everything she's built her self-image on. And this is the question I want to invite you today. What is the surface fear you know about yourself? What might be living underneath it? Because the surface fear, as you see, is just the costume. The deep fear is in the Boggart's true message. Now, let's take Lupin's Boggart. This is one of the most poignant of the entire saga. His greatest fear is a full moon, not a creature, not a person, not even a thing really, but just the moon at its fullest. Because, well, you know, the full moon is what triggers his transformation into a werewolf. It is the one moment when he loses control over himself. This is the one moment he becomes something he fears and he hates, something that could hurt the people he loves. So Lupin is not actually afraid of the full moon. He is afraid of what he becomes in that time. He is afraid of his own nature. This is a completely different category of fear, because it has no face, no body, and no clear face. It is abstract and internal. It is the fear of a part of yourself. So let's just pause on this for a moment, because I think a lot of us carry this kind of fear too. The fear of losing control. Does it talk to you? The fear of not being enough, like Hermione. The fear of being someone you don't want to be. The fear of being found out. That underneath the capable, together, functioning version of you, there is something wilder and messier and more frightening. These fears don't look like spiders, right? They don't have 8 legs and they don't skitter across the floor. They look like the full moon. Silent, inevitable, coming every month no matter what you do. And they are harder to face because you can't quite point at them and say, it's it, right there. But you can still transform them. And that is exactly what Riddikulus, the spell, teaches us. So let's see why Riddikulus is the most powerful spell in this saga. Ridiculous! It sounds just like a simple spell in the 3rd year. Just make it funny, make it ridiculous, laugh. But I want to suggest to you that Riddikulus is actually one of the most sophisticated and demanding pieces of magic in the entire saga. Because what it requires, really requires, is this: the ability to transform your internal representation of your fear. Not to deny it or to pretend that it's not there, but to hold it in your mind and look at it directly. And then, deliberately, consciously, choose to see it differently. Ron imagines the giant spider in roller skaters, legs going everywhere. The spider becomes absurd, and the threat collapses. Neville imagines Professor Snape in his grandmother's vulture hat, an oversized handbag. The imposing, terrifying authority figures becomes a comedy. Of course, this is very laughable, but here is what I want you to notice. They had to know their fear first. They had to see it clearly, in all its power, before they could transform it. You cannot ridicule something you haven't looked at. Which is exactly why facing your Boggart is an act of extraordinary courage. Not because you're fighting the monster, because you're choosing to look at the thing inside of you that you have been avoiding. And then, and this is the magic, choosing to change the story you tell about it. So now, let's bring it into your real life. I want to give you a 3-step Riddikulus practice, because the spell doesn't only work in Lupin's classroom. Step 1. Name the surface fear. What is the thing that, when you think about it, makes your stomach tighten? Write it down. Say it out loud if you can. And don't skip this step, because naming matters. You know what Hermione says. Fear of a name only increases the fear of the thing itself. Step 2. Ask what is underneath. This is the deeper work. If this fear came true, what would it really mean? What would be lost? What does this fear say about your value, what you need, what you're protecting? We said Ron spiders, powerlessness. Hermione's failure, identity collapse. Lupin's moon, the fear of his own nature. What is your fear really about? Step 3. Find your Riddikulus. We're not just trying to dismiss the fear here, but to find a way to hold it with a little more lightness, a little more distance, a little more, I see you, and you don't get to run my life. Maybe it's gonna be humor, like Ron with the spider and its roller skates. Or maybe it's gonna be reframing, like finding the gift inside the fear. Maybe it's just the simple recognition that this fear lives in the future or in the past, but not in the present. Because in the present moment, right here, right now, it's not here. Here is what I know after years of coaching people. Fear loses its power the moment you stop running from it and you start looking at it. So this was very important when Hermione said that fear of a name only increases the fear itself. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it shrinks when you name it, when you see it, when you acknowledge it. And in that shrinking, there is your freedom, and this is where your Riddikulus is. So the Boggart doesn't create your fear. It reveals it, it holds it up in front of you and says, "Here, this is what you have been carrying." And the world of Harry Potter, in its wisdom, didn't give us a spell to destroy the Boggart. It gave us a spell to transform our relationship with what it shows us. Because the fear itself is not the enemy. It is the part of you that is most ready to grow. Next week, we're going to go even deeper. We're going to talk about Harry's Boggart specifically and what it reveals about the profound theme in the entire saga: fear versus love, and why Harry's greatest power was never his wand. So, subscribe if you don't want to miss it. And tell me in the comments what is your Boggart, the surface fear, and if you're feeling brave, what you think might be beneath it. I am Alice, and I'm gonna see you next week. Until next time, and remember, the wand chooses the wizard, but you chooses everything else. May your choices be your magic.